Mr. Mantle, congratulations on your new title. Thank the witnesses for your thoughts and insights today. A couple thoughts. We had another disappointing GDP number today. Some of it was weather related. We hope it's picked up next quarter. It's been a disappointing recovery. We're all hopeful we can do better. Regulation, I think, has helped drag down the economic recovery. What I've noticed I come from a Chamber of Commerce background, so you create a local business climate. You help start small businesses, help them survive tough times. You recruit new industry. You create a business climate for growth. There's always a natural tension between business and regulation. There should be a healthy tension. I've never seen it at the level we see today. It doesn't matter what size businesses or where they're at, regulation, aside from the economy, is the #1 concern facing them as they try to expand and in some cases survive. So today is about how we remove that drag on the economy and actually help our economy grow. A couple questions. Does anyone on the panel object to expanding cost-benefit analysis to independent agencies like the SEC, the FCC, and the Fed, as it is now applied to the executive agencies? Anyone think that's a bad idea? Does anyone believe closing the loopholes so that no agencies or regulations are exempt from an objective cost-benefit analysis if they're a major rule? Does anyone object to that principle? Third question, and this is the one I need your insight on. How do we end agency bias? How do we, or at least mitigate the thought that agencies develop regulations and then are tasked with determining whether their benefits outweigh their costs? As you'd imagine, the rare times it occurs, 3 out of every 1,000 new federal regulations have gone through this objective analysis, 3 out of 1,000. When that occurs oftentimes the agency, as you would imagine, decides their own regulation is in fact a good one, not surprising. So how do we create the transparency up front? And I think, Dr. Graham, you made the point that there's a number of quasi-regulatory decisions made early on that have a huge impact. How do we create transparency? How do we end agency bias? Is it requiring them to identify up front how they're going to measure this cost-benefit analysis, invite public comment? So in an increasingly complex world, some assume we have to have complex regulations. I assume we have to have more complex analysis up front. So Mr. Timmons, let me start with you. Your ideas on how we mitigate or begin to address agency bias.
Well, I think several of the proposals that the other panelists made here today are vital to that, specifically with regard to agencies. You referenced when you introduced me that I had experience working for a governor, and states are, well, the states that really want to see economic growth and economic development are very focused on the things that make them competitive, and the regulatory environment is clearly one of those. The governor that I worked for immediately seized the reins on the regulatory process through executive order, and he demanded and required through executive order a review of every single regulation. It was a retrospective review of whether the regulations were still relevant, and ordered a top-to-bottom review of their cost-benefit. And in the process, Virginia ended up either amending or abolishing 75% of those regulations. That's not getting directly to your question, but one of the things that he did insist on, and it created, I mean, just very honestly, it created a firestorm at the beginning when he insisted that those that are regulated have a seat at the table to present their analysis, their experiences, because oftentimes the regulators, as well-intentioned as they are and were in Virginia, did not have the real-world experience of how the perhaps either the intended or unintended consequences of a regulation might impact that business. In the end, there was unanimous praise from all sectors, from folks on different sides of the philosophical divide on that process and how effective it was. And I think it's a model for the rest of the country. I think that would be very helpful at the federal level.
Thank you. Dr. Greenstone, your thoughts?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to come back to the first question you asked. I think there are there are some opportunities for bringing the independent agencies under the same rules and requirements that the other agencies face. I think that would probably have to be examined, though, on a case-by-case basis. I don't know that we want OIRA overlooking what the monetary policy is of the Federal Reserve. So I just want to put that note of caution out there. I think it probably should be considered on a case.
But on the regulatory, but you wouldn't object to that. Obviously, the Fed, as you know, has a pretty robust regulatory agenda, has a major impact on our financial institutions. They've been given more power there. I agree on the monetary side of that. On the regulatory side, though, I think their impact's fairly strong.
Yes, no, I think that one could make a very strong case, actually, that what came out of Dodd-Frank should have been subject to OIRA oversight, to be honest.
Yeah.
And because it went in the Fed and supposed in the Treasury, that didn't happen. So.
Got it.
I think, does anyone object to widespread cost-benefit analysis? That's, I think, the more cost-benefit analysis, the better. We'll be able to make better decisions. It'll help our economy. And as you pointed out, it's been a disappointing recovery, and I think having a clear-eyed look at things in advance would help. I think where there is the easiest opportunity to change things in a positive way is to change the culture of regulatory analysis. And that, as you highlighted, Mr. Chairman, right now almost all analysis of regulation comes from the people who are doing the regulations. And I have a very high view of myself as a father and a husband, and occasionally my wife is able to cut through the noise in my head and highlight that maybe there's an alternative viewpoint. And I just think history is very unkind to institutions that only engage in self-evaluation. And so how can that be done? As I outlined in my testimony, I think the easiest way to do it is to introduce a new player. And the CBO has been unbelievably effective at changing the quality of analysis that goes into budgeting. And I think it's just laying there as a slam dunk for regulatory analysis.
Right.
And it would make the agency's analyses better as well, knowing that they would face their analyses would face scrutiny from a CBO-style organization.
Thank you, Doctor. I, too, hate those marital cost-benefit analysis. They never work out well for me. And we're running out of time. Dr. Graham, Mr. Mantle, thoughts on agency bias?
Just very quickly, OIRA had about 50 full-time equivalent staff when I served for Mitch Daniels in the Bush administration, and it's now at 38, and it's been a steady erosion. So if you want inside the executive branch a reasonable check on the agencies, we need to staff OIRA appropriately.
Yeah, got it. Good point. Thanks. Mr. Mantle?
And I would just add, through FDASIA in 2012, we required much earlier connectivity with the agency. I think those interactions are important. The one thing, that I would urge the committee to really work with regulators on is, an analysis around what activities are actually value added. So in our business, for example, the legal requirements are to make sure that medical devices are safe and effective. And certainly the regulation process, whether it's through submissions or inspections, includes a lot of other activities that don't go to that value add to American businesses and patients, which is, fulfilling the legal responsibilities. And so, staying true to their legal responsibilities, but also asking the question, are we adding value to our economy, to patients, I think is an important question.
Nope, great point. Thank you all.